This is Forged for Speed.
In today's video, I will show you how to replace the cooling coil in the Gen 2. How I knew my cooling coil was leaking is that I could smell the R134a refrigerant gas once I turned on the air conditioning. You will need to remove the dashboard completely, which I have covered in my previous video, link in the description. Before we start, please consider to subscribe and hit the bell icon to receive notifications when a new video is uploaded. Let's start by cleaning off all the dust that has collected behind the dashboard to give us a clean interior. Here is the blower which pushes air through the cabin filter, which is made by Petco, and into the cooling coil, creating cold air. Next, you will need to loosen the crash bar to make space to pull out the cooling coil assembly. There are 4 bolts on the top and 4 bolts at the bottom that needs to be removed to free the crash bar. Now there are a couple of cables connected to the assembly. Proceed to disconnect all the connectors. Make a note on which connector goes to which socket. Next is to check if there is gas pressure in the aircon system as a precaution. Hook up a manifold gauge to read the pressure in the system and place the bleed hose into a bottle to catch any compressor oil being blown out when releasing the gas pressure. Here you can see there is 65 psi in the system, which is pretty high. Open the manifold valve and slowly bleed off the refrigerant gas to the atmosphere. Do make sure you do this in a ventilated area. Now with zero pressure in the system, it is safe to disconnect the piping held down by one bolt and a hook style bracket. The larger pipe on top is the low pressure side and the smaller pipe below is for the high pressure side. Next, remove the expansion valve, which is held down by 2 hex bolts. Now let's remove the blower, cabin filter and cooling coil assembly by removing 3 bolts at the top and 3 at the bottom. The whole assembly should come out freely without the need to use much force. If you find that it is stuck, double check as there must be a bolt you have missed out to remove. Here is how cold air is made. The fan blower takes the interior air and pushes it through the cabin filter. Clean air then enters the cooling coil where it is cooled down and flows out through the aircon vents. On the other side, this is where the expansion valve sits that makes high pressure refrigerant gas expand, creating cold gas that flows into the cooling coil, cooling down air blown through it. Now let's start cleaning the blower out from all the dust that has collected in it after so many years. There are a couple of Phillips screws to remove to open up the blower assembly. With plain water and a brush, clean off all the dust stuck on the blower. Next, disconnect the cabin filter assembly from the cooling coil box. It is just held together by a simple plastic clip. Now remove a few Phillips screws to open up the cooling coil plastic covers. Once free, the cooling coil can be pulled out from the box. Next, disconnect the expansion valve piping from the cooling coil by removing two hex bolts. Always do a physical comparison of the old and new part to ensure it is identical. I bought the new cooling coil from APM and not from Petco. Overall, there is slight differences, but it can be used. I also took an extra step to change out the expansion valve piping so that I have a brand new system under the dashboard. Here, the new pipe does not have an insulation like the original one, but no worries, just buy the insulation tape and wrap it up. It is a must to be insulated to prevent condensation water from happening and wetting the carpet. Next is to replace all deteriorated foam, as you can see here, before assembling back everything together. This is very important as it prevents air from leaking out the box before it reaches the cooling coil, making the system less efficient. This deteriorated foam also causes air to flow out vents near the windscreen, causing fogging to happen even though those vents are closed. I bought 3M sound insulation foam as a replacement as it is thick enough and more durable. I use isopropyl alcohol, which is also rubbing alcohol, to remove the glue residue. Now slot in the new cooling coil and install the temperature sensor in the middle of the coil. Next, remove the old O-ring from the old cooling coil to compare the size with a new O-ring for replacement. Repeat these steps for all connections that has an O-ring installed, which will prevent any connection leaks from happening. With a new O-ring at the connection, install the expansion valve piping to the cooling coil. Now it is time to reinstall the whole assembly back into the car. Next, reinstall the piping connected to the expansion valve. Next, change out the receiver dryer since it is likely to be fully saturated with moisture after being exposed to the humid atmosphere. Since the system was leaking gas, compressor oil would have also leaked out. so I topped up 10 ml of compressor oil as a rough estimate. With the system all connected up, time to vacuum out the system to clear it out of air and moisture. I usually vacuum the system for 3 to 4 hours for the best results. You should see a negative pressure that will stop at around negative 30 psi. This is a good early indication that the system does not have any leaks. After 3 to 4 hours, close the manifold valve and turn off the vacuum pump. Continue to monitor the vacuum pressure for another 24 hours to check if there are leaks. Since it is confirmed that there are no leaks in the system, start to reassemble back the crash bar and the dashboard. Next, start the engine and fill in R134a gas into the system. 1 can of R134a is sufficient. Once the system has about 50 psi, turn on the air conditioning. Continue to add gas into the low pressure system until the high pressure side shows about 200 psi to 220 psi. Then monitor the aircon temperature for coolness. To further improve the aircon performance, use this Coil cleanser to clean the front aircon condenser. Follow the instructions on the dilution required and spray it directly onto the condenser. Watch all the dirt get stripped off. If required, repeat the step for a second time to achieve a true deep clean. Then, rinse down with a lot of water until clean. Reinstall the front bumper and the job is done.